what I'd like to do first is to light a candle. And so you'll see the candle is here. I will have to light it and then raise it. And that will continue to burn during our session here. So as you probably all know, this Chinese saying which says, rather light a candle than curse the darkness. So this is what we're trying to do over the weekend, light some candles in the darkness and turbulence of our time. The speakers we have over the weekend, we've got Serge speaking from Mallorca, then this afternoon we've got Alistair speaking from Dumfries. He's having to move to a slightly stronger signal. I'm speaking here in my study in Sainte-Colombe in France. And then tomorrow, Shakti Caterina Maggi will be speaking from Lockdown, Italy. And then finally, we have Larry Dossi speaking from Santa Fe. So it's a wonderful international flavor to the event. We're obviously very sorry that we're not all together physically at Horsley Park, but we have moved that exactly a year on. I think the dates are the 11th to the 13th of April next year. So we'll be reconvening physically, hopefully at that stage. I hope that many of you will have had the newsletter yesterday. If you haven't, it probably went into your spam box. We're having a few issues on that. And you'll have seen a quote from Sir Winston Churchill, which said that the pessimist sees a difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimist an opportunity in every difficulty. And so I think this is the situation that we're in. We're in some difficulties, but there are opportunities, new opportunities to be had. And I'm sure it hasn't gone unnoticed for you that this has also given rise to a huge amount of humor. And you will have all had various things, including sort of spoof Mary Poppins songs. You can find that on YouTube. Spoof Tintin titles, Tintin forgetting to take his attestation, his statement, that when he goes out for a walk, and he gets apprehended by the police. The wonderful music that's been coming from balconies in Italy and various other places. There's even a spoof on that, which is not very flattering for the Brits. And then finally, before introducing Serge, last night I was reading the new edition of Private Eye, and I thought you'd be amused by this. It says, EasyJet to demand a bailout. So, and it's written by a man called Heath Rowe, the aviation correspondent. And the Downing Street spokesman said they agreed to EasyJet's plea for an urgent meeting, but only with strict conditions attached. One, the EasyJet representatives will be charged £40 each if they want to bring a bag or briefcase with them into the meeting. It'll be an additional £150 each if they want to sit next to each other. And the third condition is that the meeting will take place 60 miles away from where they were told it would take place. So I love the fact that that humor is coming through in this situation. And we can all have some good laughs, even if we're having personal challenges. So it's a great pleasure to introduce my very old friend, Serge Beddington-Behrens. We met in San Francisco in 1984, so that's not yesterday. And we lived in adjacent houses belonging to Serge from 1986 to 1991 in Hampnet in Gloucestershire, which was a tremendous period. And I remember at the time Serge saying that we really have to take a stand. We have to take a stand for what we really believe in. And Serge, in San Francisco, he founded the Institute for Conscious Evolution. He's one of the founders in the 1980s. And of course, this is what we're all at the moment, this whole process of conscious evolution. He's a transpersonal psychotherapist, a shaman, activist, and educator. His earlier book was Awakening the Universal Heart. And his book that's just coming out is, we seem to have got somebody in their dressing gown on the display, Andrew. We're now looking into somebody's room, which they were, it says Darfan, I think it is. So you'll need to do something about that. His new book that's coming out is called Gateways to the Soul, Inner Work for the Outer World. So Serge, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to speak about surviving and thriving in dark times of Corona. And over to you in Mallorca with your wonderful African statues behind you.
Great, David. Thank you very much. Do I need to come into the picture? Do I need to, or do I stay at the edge? Because this is the first time I've done this, David.
That's fine. That's fine, Serge. We can see you. You're right in this. You're right.
You can see me. Good. Yes. Okay. Fine. Oh, well, folks, my dear friends from all over the world, I welcome you. And I'm just going to tell you what this 2-hour is going to consist of. I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes, then it's open to discussion. Then after an hour, we'll have a 5-minute break. And then I'm going to talk for another 12 minutes. And then we'll have questions and answers, and I'm going to do a guided visualization. And on the talk, I'm going to give my viewpoint is that this is a spiritual crisis. Now, there's many viewpoints that we can have on this. So this is just one. And I'm this perspective. I'm seeing this as an expression of what a wonderful teacher of mine, Ram Dass, called fierce grace. Ram Dass was rocking and rolling along happily in his career, doing lots of talks and workshops. Suddenly he was hit by a stroke. He talked about being stroked, and his whole life changed. And it was actually the beginning of a whole new dimension in his world. And I feel that this is the same thing for us, because what has happened is that our world has stopped. I don't know if you ever, if any of you are familiar with the Carlos Castaneda books, with Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda, the shaman. He was always telling Don Juan, I'm going to stop your world of the tonal, of the normal reality, because I'm going to introduce you to another world. And we are in the position now, all of us, where we've had our world, our normal world stopped. We haven't yet had another world introduced. So that is basically what I'm going to talk about. Okay, are there any questions before I start? Okay, right, I'm going to start now. So if you want a pen and paper, get a pen and paper if you want to make any notes. On the surface, my friends, this is an unmitigated tragedy. Death of the frailest people, the loss of livelihood. Will many people ever find their jobs again? It's very scary. Is one going to survive? Millions and millions of people have lost their jobs and they don't know how they're going to make ends meet. Institutions are breaking up. There's a lot of depression and despair. What's going to happen? I'm afraid the safe world I knew is no more. What's going to happen if this gets to places like Yemen or Syria, where people are very close together? It's carnage everywhere. And beautiful, kind people are dying, and there's huge sorrow, and we have to take that into our hearts. And it's worse than a tsunami or an earthquake or a tornado, because they're local. This is global. None of us are excluded. And it seems like a terrible, terrible curse that everything that gave us security, our identities, our busyness, our meetings with people, our friendship, all is standing still. And into this maelstrom have descended all sorts of conspiracy theories, which always accompany big events like this. You know, did the Chinese start this? Is this really 5G electromagnetism? We're going to hear about that from our next speaker. You know, perhaps Elvis Presley on the moon, who's now gone on to the moon, perhaps he started it. Perhaps the CIA did, or that sinister band of Illuminati, the financiers behind the scenes, perhaps they did it. And at one level, it doesn't really matter what is behind it. The fact is that it's there. And for many of us, it feels like some terrible mistake has happened. And we can't understand it. And there's no meaning. But just because we can't understand something or we can't get the meaning does not mean that there is not a meaning. And all my experience of life, from my meditations, from my studies, from my experiences with ayahuasca, from my experiences in my own sort of personal life, my clients have told me that there is a higher intelligence at work in the universe, and that sometimes this higher intelligence intervenes at particular times in history. So I see this pandemic as an intentional intervention. And given the state of our planet at the moment, where many suggest that unless we change our ways, we're going to go over the precipice, or some feel we've already gone too far. We actually needed an intervention. We needed something to stop us in our tracks. Humanity as a whole requires something. We require something to save us from ourselves, because we're not currently changing our ways. Now, there's a hell of a lot of crises on the planet, which we're all aware of: starvation crisis, the nuclear, the hunger crisis, the refugee crisis, the poverty crisis, the climate change crises. Millions die each year from depression and drugs. Why are we not dealing with these crises, and why are we dealing with this particular crisis? Well, this particular crisis concerns us all. The other crises, it's easy to put off because they don't really impinge on us. So politicians want to be elected because they know that people are more interested in whether their real estate is going up in value or not, than if poor people at the other end of the world, who in no way impinge on their own lives, are given food. And that's the kind of world that we've lived in, that we've been able to get away with not dealing with the real crises in the world, that we shut ourselves off from what's really important. And the fact that millions starve is just an inconvenient, as Al Gore sort of put it, is just an inconvenient truth. But the fact that this pandemic touches all of us has a huge meaning. And I think we need to realize that in exactly the same way as earthquakes and tsunamis and droughts and rainfall and fires don't emerge from nowhere, they are an expression of the way we've treated our planet, and our planet is fighting back. So I think that we need to see this crisis as an expression of the same thing. It's a reflection of our own destructiveness. In fact, Rudolf Steiner said, a virus is the expression of a toxic cell. And my dear friends, I feel we're all having our own toxicity come back to look us in the face. And just as at a personal level, we tend not to make changes in our lives just by knowing that we need to. Like the alcoholic knows that he should stop drinking, but he doesn't until it gets too bad, until it hits rock bottom. So it's the same with all of us. And I see this crisis as a ginormous, a stupendous wake-up call, where we're having to confront our own darkness, both at a personal level and at a human collective. We're having to go into our own shadow. We're having to confront our greed and our narrow-mindedness, our linkedness, our obsession with money and power, how we've created a world that only works for a few and not for the many. And now we're living in this in-between world because our old world has stopped. We haven't yet created a new world. We don't know what's going to happen. But in this in-between world where all our supports and things that we identify with to make us feel important, or our houses, our property, our portfolios, all these things which we in the West value so much, they're now all laid side by side. And we're just alone with ourselves. And I was thinking this, that just as if we have a disease in one part of our body, it will come down and inflict other parts. Say I have brain cancer, it'll affect my stomach and the capacity of my legs to move. So this toxicity of the whole, this disease, this cancer that has taken part in the whole, affects all of us, affects each of us in our different ways. And it doesn't really matter who we are, that we could still die from this. A Buddhist monk, young man, a friend of mine, is just in the process of dying. And it seems unfair, but the fact is that he, like you and all of us, we're all part of this collective. Now, the fact is that what I think this crisis is going to do, it's going to wake us up to realize that there are the other crises on the planet, and that even if the world comes together in a concerted way to find a vaccine, and Bill Gates suggests this has to happen at a global level, it can't happen with different countries each trying to do that same thing, that we're going to realize that unless we deal with the absurdities of spending billions on weapons of mass destruction and war and all the absurd things that we spend money in, that this crisis is going to linger. Just imagine if it gets to the very poor countries and it spreads like wildfire in the South African townships. Well, it could come back to the West, perhaps having mutated. So that we need to take into consideration that we're all in this together. This crisis is waking us up to realize we're not, as John Donne said, islands unto ourselves, but we're part of the whole of humanity. That we're not individuals, we're multi-vigils. And it's breaking down all these barriers that we have. And suddenly we realize we're all in it together. It doesn't matter if we're poor or rich or black or white or gay or straight or all these things that we've used to separate us from one another. We're all in this together. So what I'm saying is that we've been too identified with a world that doesn't work and trying to fix it and put plaster on the patches. But now we're realizing that we can't do it and the virus is doing the work for us. That's why I like to call it fierce grace. And the spiritual aspect of it is that we're having to confront who we really are. And yes, the masks, we may be having to wear masks on our face, but my friends, I can see in a lot of people the masks or the identities that we've worn internally are beginning to fall away. And I think that these are times that we really have a space to work on ourselves, to ask ourselves, who are we? What is our role in the universe? What has man come on the planet to do? Perhaps we have to become more courageous. Perhaps we need to let go our old attachments. And so this seclusion is a real opportunity to do inner work. And as dear David said, I've just written this book saying that if we want to have a changed world, we need to work to bring it into being. And I think that by taking away our old securities, it is opening up a new space for this to happen. Another angle, and I think it's very important that we include this, is to simply say that civilization is running down. And William Opels, who's written a lot about this, has this to say in one of his books, and I just want to quote: civilization is trapped in a thermodynamic vicious circle. The greater a civilization becomes, the more people produce and consume, but the more they produce and consume, the larger increase in entropy. The longer economic development continues, the more depletion, decay, degradation, and disorder accumulate in the system as a whole, even if it brings a host of short-term benefits. At some point, just as in the ecological realm, civilization exhausts its thermodynamic credit and begins to explode. And when it does, it can do so with alarming speed. Now, my friends, the problem with the 2008 crisis is that it didn't go deep enough. It didn't hit enough people. And the financial people managed to get together to address the symptoms, but it went back to business as usual. But it was a pointer. We could have made changes, but we weren't hit deep enough. And that's the whole point. Gurdjieff, a spiritual teacher, said a wonderful thing. Man being the resistant creature that he is, he only changes if faced by a shock greater than the sum of his own inertia. And this is this shock. That's why I call this fierce grace. In the long term, I see that what is happening human collective-wise, looking at the future, that this is a blessing because it's connecting humanity together. And the blessing may not be visible at the time, but in terms of our human future and our capacity to survive and our ability to evolve as human beings, because we need to evolve beyond being simply ego identified. This is a great spiritual teacher. It's one of those teachers, those hard teachers. It's a teacher that takes us into the tough realms. It's the teacher of tough love. Yes, our financial system may well collapse. No more IMF, no more neoliberalism, the end of globalization. Our democratic systems may also crumble. And my friends, democracy needs to be reborn. It's reached the limits of its growth. And as you all know, for something new to come into being, something old has to die. And what this is telling us is that it's time for a rebirth of death. So I would also call this the angel of death and resurrection. Only the resurrection is going to take some time, because spiritually we need to do a lot of our dying quite consciously. Yes, we're seeing a literal death. Hundreds of thousands are dying, terrible tragedy. But it's also a psychological death, I see. Immature man is going to die and be, and what will be reborn in us is a more mature human being. Our institutions and organizations and political and economic systems that only work for the few and marginalize the many, they need to die, because we need a greater sense of integration. And so I see that what is happening, and this idea just came to me in a dream last night, and you may think it's sort of a bit weird. It feels as if that this is a purging, it's like a purification. And maybe some of us have to be sacrificed on the altar of change. I mean, sort of literally, sort of giving our lives to have a new world come into being, a new and better world. Because I absolutely believe with all my heart and soul that a new world is going to come into being. And then we remember that the word sacrifice means to make sacred. So is this all the expression of a very, very sacred process that is going on, that we need to tune in to this process? My friends, what I'm seeing is the emerging of enormous goodness. Look at our doctors and nurses on the front line. They're doing the most incredible jobs. They are actually sacrificing their lives. But when you see them interviewed on television, there's a vitality and vibrancy. They're alive. They're being of service. And Schweitzer said something once. He said, I don't know how you think is the way to be happy, but one thing I know is that the way to be happy is to serve. And my friends, this is an opportunity for us all to be of service, both to ourselves, to give birth to a new self inside us, and to serve our fellow human beings, to make a difference. This is what we all need to do. And there's an immense amount of goodwill in the world. And you see it, that wonderful old man that was nearly 100, who walked up and down his garden, on his Zimmer frame, try and raise money. We're going through a collective dark night of the soul, where we're having, as I said, to confront all that is worst about us. Jung understood this. He said, if you want to be spiritual, don't just sit on the mountaintop, but go down into the darkness. And this is where we are all journeying now. It is our spiritual journey into the darkness, because it's in the darkness where the light appears. And we haven't yet reached the light. We're still going down into the darkness. And things may get a lot darker still. I need to share with you that there was a period in my life about 35 years ago. I was training in shamanism in the jungles of Mexico, and I caught some tropical disease that you get from parrots. I was terribly ill. I was put into hospital, and I was in hospital for nearly 3 months. At the same time, I had a big financial loss. Girlfriend I was very fond of dumped me. She said, "You're just a selfish old bastard," and she was actually very right. And a good friend of mine was killed. Suddenly, all the securities were taken away from me, and I was lying on this hospital bed, and all that I was being confronted with all the time was seeing my own dark side, seeing how selfish I was, seeing my own sort of narcissistic disorder, seeing my manipulations, seeing that my games with women were not very healthy. I was very predatory. I was narrow. And my value system was sort of warped. I had an idea of myself as a superior kind of person because I had a posh accent. All that terrible nonsense. Well, 3 months, nearly 3 months on a hospital bed, I suddenly woke up. And at the moment when I got through my physical disease, I went through a metaphysical change. And the Serge who woke up was not the same Serge that went into hospital those few months ago. And I had lost a lot of all my pomposity and those illusions and false ideas about myself and the world that I believed in. And I think that humanity collectively, that we're all going through a collective descent. And so I think that we have a choice, that we can mourn a world that's no more and try to hang on, try to hold on to our old jobs, try to cling to a raft that is sinking into the maelstrom, or we can say, look, let's go with what's happening. Let's go with the flow. Let's see what needs to happen. Let's surrender to the energy. Because I think there's a very strong current that is pulling us all in a new direction. And what I know from my spiritual teachers that I've worked with is that in times of huge crisis, we draw tremendous spiritual help from higher realms of consciousness. And I'm aware of this at the moment. And it's easier to pray. It's easier to meditate, although a lot of people think that with the electromagnetic currents about this is more difficult. For me, it's not. So really take advantage. The spiritual worlds, the higher spiritual worlds are coming close to us. And they're trying to support us in our death. Because these are initiatory times. Humanity is going through a ginormous initiation. And an initiation is a test. Are we going to make it? Are we going to stand brave, or are we going to collapse? Are we going to go forward and hold the hands of our fellow human beings? Because I think we're challenged to go forward collectively, to realize our human collective, and that we need each other. Are we going to go forward, or are we going to hold on to a world that is doing its best to die? Now, one thing that I think is going to happen from this that's important, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, is that I think that those people who are at the center of power at the moment and who are holding the old system in place, sort of most of our world leaders, I particularly think of the President of America, who is only thinking of what his country wants and not what he can do to help the larger whole. I think that kind of thinking, those people who hold a particular kind of power and status because of their money and their influence in certain areas, I think that these people who are currently at the center, they're going to fall to the edges of civilization. And I think that those of us, probably most of you who are watching, who exist on the fringes, are going to come more and more into the center. And because a space is going to open up for us to be able to put our new visions into operation. I believe that we have all the capability to solve all the problems in the world, but what we don't have is the willingness, and those who are capable of doing it don't have the opportunity. I think that this crisis is a wonderful opening whereby we're going to be given the opportunity for a whole new kind of leadership, a whole new kind of emergence of our deeper human capabilities. And we are going to solve the problems of the world. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much indeed. And so maybe, Andrew, if we could have a few questions, I think it would be good.
Serge, thank you very much indeed. That's incredibly rich narrative and set of ideas that you've presented for us, and many of them, I think, they all resonated with me, and I'm sure they'll be resonating with other people as well. I'd just like to pick up two points. One is that is to introduce the word liminal. You said we were in an in-between world, which I think is absolutely right. And you know, the word liminal is the liminal space, which is neither here nor there. It's on the way to somewhere else, and it's all part of an initiation. So that was my first thought. And my second thought is a quote from Jim Rohn, the business leader. And he said, there are only two reasons that people change, either inspiration or desperation. And
great, I love that.
You said that you talked about the desperation, and often, you know, we have the chance to change through inspiration, but it's desperation that gets us.
Yeah.
So, and I totally agree that we're now in a situation that impinges on all of us, and gives us an opportunity to come together in an unprecedented way. Anyway, I will mute myself and make way for some questions from other people.
Great, thank you, David.
Great, we've just had someone raise their hand, Serge, so I'll go ahead and unmute that. It's Joe. So Joe, I'm unmuting you now, if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you.
Hi, Joe.
Thank you, Serge, very much for that. As I understand it, one of the things you're doing is extrapolating the virus crisis into a general crisis of modernity in terms of showing that our political structures and our financial structures are inadequate and not serving humanity. But nonetheless, you know, we need the fruits of modernity to move forward from this. We need, you know, the sophisticated institutions of research and finance and so forth to find a vaccine. The whole mechanism for communication today, the sophistication of the internet is in a sense a triumph of modernity. And you know, it's modernity, it's these interconnections, the fact that we're now living in a small world, which actually have the possibility, the opportunity to decisively intervene in what's a much bigger crisis, which is the climate change crisis. I'm wondering how you reconcile all that and how you really keep the good bits of modernity and move.
Hello? Okay. Can everyone hear me if I reply? Okay. I think that's a tremendous question that you said. Hegel talks about that we move forward by going back into the past, taking up the past that is necessary and moving it up sort of with us. So the new is not a war against the past. It's a moving away and an integration of the best of the past with what needs to emerge. I spoke yesterday with a billionaire financier who's an old friend of mine. And he said, I'm completely changing the way I'm doing my investment. I want to create a new fund that will send billions of money to the problems in South Africa. You know, my heart is opening. So I think it's a gradual sort of shifting and transmutation, but not a total shedding. You know, just as if in my process of moving from an adolescent to an adult, I had to slowly let go my adolescence. In fact, there's still a lot of it I've still got, but I'm technically an adult. So I absolutely agree that we don't reject our past. Like transpersonal psychotherapy does not reject Freud. We owe a lot of gratitude to Freud, but we've moved into areas beyond Freud. I hope that answers it to some extent.
Brilliant, thanks, Serge. We've got another question from Don, and I'm just going to unmute you now, Don. Oh, bear with me. Okay, Don, you're unmuted.
Okay, thanks very much.
Hi, Don.
Hi, Serge. Yeah, I was thinking about your statement for something new to come into being, something old has to die. And I was musing really as you were talking that it's no coincidence that this whole thing has happened through Lent and moving up towards Easter and death and resurrection, which is bringing it to people's awareness. It's like we'll make this happen now so that people, it's brought more into people's awareness. And of course, it's then followed, the next full moon is followed by Wesak, celebrating the Buddha's sort of birth, enlightenment, and movement onto the next stage, whatever that might be. And it's this whole idea of bringing something into a new form, and the old form has to go. I think it's no coincidence it's happened at this sort of powerful time of year for the ideas of death and resurrection. It's just a comment, really.
I absolutely agree. Well said. Well said. Terrific. Yeah. You know, that the only difference is that it only took a few days for Jesus to push away the stone. It might take us a few years.
Yeah, a little bit longer. Yeah.
Yes, you know, the resurrection is not going to happen earlier, but there has to be death before resurrection. And as a species, we're afraid of death. We're afraid of our own physical death. We're afraid of the death of the things that are familiar. And there's a kind of rigidity in us. And this rigidity is being ground out of us by what we're going through. And certain people may not be able to take the new pressure. And there will be a lot of despair and depression. And by the way, I want to say just quickly that anyone here who's listening, if they want to do a session with me, I offer you a session free. You know, I am a transpersonal psychotherapist. So please, if there's any, pain or things, I am here. Just send me an email, info.sergebb@gmail.com, and I'm very happy, no charge. So I just want to say that. But yes, the resurrection, yes, we are going through death. And I think that the medieval alchemists were not macabre dudes because they had skulls on their desks. It was to remind them that death was part of life, and that if we want to live more fully, we have to embrace the mystery of death. And that's what we're having to do right now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Don. Serge, we've got a question from Sue. So I'll unmute you now, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Hello. Can I ask my question now? Yeah?
Hi, Sue.
You can hear me. I'm wondering, first of all, thank you very much for your speech. I love and agree with all your points. At the same time, I'm wondering what practical steps could facilitate change and this new world.
This is one that we'll explore in more detail in the second part, but I think that we're challenged to find what works for us and what works for us as part of the larger whole of humanity. But, you know, the one thing I think that we've got to make the changes inside ourselves.
Agree.
It is the way it is because of our lack of having made changes inside ourselves. Our unfair system is a reflection. So we've got to do the inner work. And that's what my book's about, how we need to work to make these changes in our own lives. And it's different for each.
A lot of people are not aware that they need to make a change within themselves. They just are used to their mask. They are lost in this time. How can you reach these people?
Okay. I really like what David said, that one either changes through inspiration or desperation. And I think there could well be enough desperation. When we're in great despair, we change, like the story of me when I went to hospital. I was one of them. I really was. But everything got removed from me. My old world had collapsed. This, I think, is going to serve as an awakening, but some people may not be able to do it.
Exactly.
You know, it's like you know, the salmon who swim back to source. You know, some don't make it way back to spawn.
Yes, thank you.
We might not all make it, and so we need to be very tender and loving towards those of our friends who are vulnerable, and not say to them, you should change, you know, because this does nothing. It just makes people more angry and resistant. But we just need to be tender towards those people who find it difficult to make those shifts.
Okay, thank you very much. Lovely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Serge, we've got Paul has raised his hand, or it looks like Paul and Amber, and I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, guys.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Yes, thank you very much, Serge, for a very inspiring presentation. However, it has raised a lot of doubts in my mind.
Good.
And the reason is, it seems to me like the point of view of a member of a privileged class who has the time and opportunity to sit and think about their spiritual growth and development. Think about the blacks in Louisiana who are dying. 70% of all coronavirus deaths are among blacks, and only 30% of Louisiana's population is black.
Yeah.
Look at the corpses in Guayaquil in Ecuador. It's the poor, the disadvantaged who are taking it on the chin, while the stock market goes back slowly to its present levels. And the bankers and everything else are going to come out well. I think you really have to look about this again, because I feel that to look at it as some divine sent event or disaster is the wrong way to look at it. When a hurricane comes, when a tsunami hits, a volcano erupts, then people don't get better, people die. That's what happens. That's the reality of it all. And we have to see this, I think, as really a disaster. Of course, there will be opportunities for some of us, at any rate, but we have to be careful with this idea that we're going to really see a better world. At the moment, I don't see any loosening of autocratic leaders in other countries. In fact, in most countries, most of the leaders are taking this opportunity to pass more repressive legislation, knowing that people can't come out into the streets to protest. It's, I think that, you know, I'd love to see the kind of change and transformation that you're talking about. And I think that will happen individually, but we have to acknowledge this for the disaster that it is. And it is a disaster in the sense of the word, a disaster, which means something coming from the stars that may actually not have been caused by us at all.
I think what you've said is absolutely fantastic, and I'm so glad that someone said it, because I agree 1,000,000% with you. What my feeling is, I quite agree that always in disasters or financial crises, it's always the poor and the underclasses who get hit in the chin. What my hope is, well, first, why I frame this positively is because I feel if one has a positive outlook, then you give energy to the positive things. So that's why I am adopting a positive, perception. But I also agree that a crisis is a tremendously dangerous opportunity. And my feeling is that the stock market will not come back. I hope it doesn't come back, because I think that the shift is going to be that the place of the poor blacks and the poor people in South Africa and Syria, I would like to feel there's going to be a rise in human compassion that will rise like a phoenix from the ashes. And I just gave that example of that friend of mine, that trust fund person. He says, I want my whole life to change. I'm only going to give money to Africa. I want billions to go to Africa. I would like to feel that there is going to be a collective awakening of heart, and hence a change of heart. But I absolutely agree with you that I think the most important thing is how we deal with the most vulnerable and tender people on the planet. I mean, again, I speak from my own experience, of my dark night experience that I gave you. I went into that illness as a rather selfish and self-centered person. I arrived, I recovered from it. That part of me died. And I wanted my life to be about helping sort of people who were vulnerable. And that has been my life ever since, in my sort of fuddly little ways. I've tried to give retreats. So I feel that if we go to enough depth, that there can be a great arising of compassion. That's what I would love to feel, and what I will give energy towards. while at the same time not excluding that those very, very important points that you brought up.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for bringing that, because it was extremely important and I didn't deal with that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Okay, the next question we have is from Jill. Jill, I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jill.
Hi. What you've been saying definitely resonates with me, and I'm reminded of what the spiritual science of astrology is saying at the moment. Because we've had Neptune in Pisces, which indicates pandemics, and we've got Pluto together with Saturn. So the effects of Pluto being grounded and doing things that are karmic, and Pluto's coming to the end of Capricorn, where it's going to cause transformation of the leadership in the world. So that resonates with what you've been saying about what may happen to politics. And when it comes out of Capricorn, it enters Aquarius, and it seems to me that this challenge that humanity is being given is part of us really entering the age of Aquarius. So that's more of a comment than a question, but lots of different perspectives seem to be saying the same thing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember in the 60s when I was a sort of part of the countercultural movement, with, a nice long-haired hippie, and we believed that a great new age would emerge out of the ashes, and, sort of maybe, as you say, we are closer to this, but but the real problems on the planet need to be dealt with. And I think there's going to be an awakening of compassion. You see, we have this idea that that the top sort of financiers and businessmen and, politicians are all just greedy pigs. Well, they have a side of them that's that, but they're also human beings like us, and they're going through exactly the same transformation. I wonder how Boris Johnson is going to emerge, having nearly died. It might soften him in some way. Some other part of him might awaken. So, so maybe, this sort of death has to happen.
Yeah, sure.
And I would like to give my energy to the emergence of what is finest in what it means to be a human being, and that we're going to sort of realize that either that we go on the side of what is finest, or it's the end.
Serge, can we
I think we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yes, that's what I was going to suggest. And then we'll come back, and we see the hands that are up at the moment, and we'll try and bring these people in due course. So let's take a 5-minute break, and back in 4 minutes, 50 seconds.
4 minutes, 50 seconds. Okay, thanks, David. Okay, so let's go on rock rolling. So,
Thank you so much, Serge. That's a lovely way to start the second half of the session. Okay, we've got a question from Eddie. I'm going to unmute you now, Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
Bear with me.
Sorry, Andrew. I thought Serge was going to say a few more words in a slightly different theme, and then we'll.
I tell you, I think we'll go on with the questions.
Okay, so
and I might not say a few more words. I might sort of integrate the question because I want to do a guided visualization.
Sure. Okay, let's carry on with the questions then.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few more hands up.
Good. So let's do some more questions.
I've just unmuted Eddie. So Eddie, go ahead and speak. You're unmuted.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hey, Eddie.
Hi. I think we should take.
I can't see you.
Hmm?
I can't see you, Eddie.
Ah. Can you see me now?
I can only see me.
We can hear you, Eddie, but...
Okay, well, I can hear you. That's good.
Yeah. I think we should take inspiration now from one of the most titanic human beings whose birth date we are celebrating after 250 years, Beethoven, who showed us really how inspiration and beauty and love can come out of tremendous hardship in personal life. Yes. But just on a more practical note, I really think that the problem is the mindset of the scientific community and the politicians who had them in the palm of their hands. This whole idea of the survival of the fittest. And in Paradigm Review, David reviewed a book that showed that Darwin actually only mentions survival of the fittest twice, but Darwin mentions the word love, I think 92 times, and Darwin mentions the spirit of community about 95 times. And if we can get this into the public mindset, that the way forward is one of cooperation and mutual love and communion, that I think would help enormously to change the collective mindset. And on the most practical note, the best way to do it is that. Can you see that? That's the Galileo Commission. And
yes,
I
we
think
can see that.
one of the wonderful ways forward that we have in our own hands to move forward from the idea of selfishness towards cooperation and mutual help.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree with you. It is really interesting, isn't it, how everyone is that we're all sort of presenting different angles, but they're all equally valid. I completely agree. It's a path forward of beauty and sort of creativity and the power of music to change consciousness. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eddie. Okay, if you're okay to keep going with questions, Serge.
Yeah, we'll do a few more questions.
Okay, brilliant. The next question is from Christian and Claudia, and I'm going to unmute you now. So if you want to speak up.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Greetings from Switzerland.
Well, my dear friend Christian and Claudia, welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, same. So individuals and societies are known to evolve according to certain patterns. moving from egocentric to ethnocentric to rational,
planet-centric, yeah.
Yeah, and then to pluralistic and integrational thinking. And Ken Wilbers, being the mastermind of the scientific numbers of these evolutions, estimates that 80% of the population, in his talk about the future of human spirituality, that 80% of humanity is at this transition from stage 2 to 3, which means from ethnocentric to pre-rational. And this explains many things, why they think things are how they are. And so being the cutting edge of this network, scientific medical network, being the cutting edge of consciousness. So how could we as a group contribute to humanity, as a group to evolve? Or do you think we have to give up the idea that we move all together as one humanity forward and just focusing on a certain group of, certain population, certain communities to move forward?
I'm just going to say a couple of things, and then I'd love you to say something, David. I'll just say that I think that that those people who are moving into the higher planet-centric realms are called upon to embrace in their heart and consciousness those who are still struggling at the egocentric, ethnocentric, and to help sort of lift them up. And maybe there's going to be a spiritual impetus, and that the old structures of how consciousness evolves are going to be speeded up, and we're going to see different laws come into expression. But I absolutely agree that we can't have this separation between those who've got it and who are more evolved and those who are kind of stuck down, in the South African township. It needs to be a collective. It needs to be a collective journey. And what is your perception, David?
I would just say a very, very small remark on this. I think we have to proceed with enormous humility.
Yeah, humility.
The idea that we are the people who know things and other people don't know things, I mean, it's just so arrogant. So I feel we have to act with enormous humility and recognizing both our potential and our limitations. The one thing I think is worth saying at this point is that the historian of culture, Arnold Toynbee, talks about the creative minority, which other people talk about the cultural creatives, Paul Ray. The creative minority is historically only 5%. And if you look at how the Renaissance happened, it happened to a very small number of people. And we have massive communications now. And so the impulse, like a small seed, is maybe very small and among a small number of people. But if it resonates sufficiently with a large number of people, then change, I think, can happen.
Thank you. Does that make sense to you, Christian?
Yeah, it makes sense, and at the same time, I agree, and I'm saying that from a very humble point of view, and I fully agree. We have to be in service and help, and it's not about superiority, things like this. But at the same time, there is. I'm a medical doctor, so I can clearly see the difference between a medical doctor who is purely rational and a medical doctor who is post-rational and has a pluralistic integrational view of the world and of the medical problems. So there are sequences of evolution, and I think it's important to admit that, because it brings a certain responsibility, as you have this integrational view of the world.
Okay.
And so you see the question is, whether I, personally, whether I put my energy into meditating for the global world, or if I focus on, let's say on my surroundings, my people, my community here. It's like two different aspects, and I still don't know which way to head.
Might it be that we're challenged to embrace both polarities?
That's an answer full of wisdom, Serge. Yeah, that's good. Good point. Thanks.
I mean, I've been finding some wonderful sort of global meditations, and I find that I've been using them, like the Great Invocation from the Alice Bailey, the Great Invocation. I'm finding myself just spontaneously sort of using these global meditations. I think that great phrase that was so important in the 70s is now come into its own, called thinking globally, acting locally, because I think we're going to see the emergence of local communities taking much greater responsibility for their lives, which they're going to be able to, because it is my hope that the monster of globalization will slowly detentacle itself from those areas of the world where it's grabbed hold of too tightly.
Thanks very much, Serge and Christian. I think we should move on to give other people some time.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question we have is from Brian. Brian, I'm about to unmute you, so go ahead.
I'm unmuted by host. Thank you very much.
Hello, Brian.
Greetings. Greetings, one and all, and friends I haven't yet met. I think there's a place for a testimony here, especially with regard to the Scientific and Medical Network and what it's done. Over the years, I've absorbed a lot, and I can see that chickens are coming home to roost in the nicest way, that all the time I spent studying life after death, reincarnation and everything, it pays off, because I find myself enlivened like no time before. I'm excited, I'm challenged, and it's acting like an enormous gyroscope of stability, for which I thank the good Lord and the universe. And the people who haven't done this, they are running around like chickens with no heads. They are frightened to death. They are paralyzed. And the way I function is to give as much support to as many people as I can. Just give them love and care for them. How are you doing? And in the last 3 weeks, I've made more contact with old friends than I ever have done before in my life. It's quite fantastic and wonderful. So I'm celebrating.
How wonderful to hear that. Terrific, terrific. And the acknowledgement to the S&M is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serge. I don't know how it is for everyone else, but I've actually been ringing old friends, not quite every evening, but I've been ringing an old friend. I've rung 3 in the last week, and they're all astonished to hear from me, because they haven't heard from me for a bit. But as we're not traveling at all, it is one thing we can all do, is actually keep our friendships going and renew them. So thank you very much, Brian.
And I'm just going to say a quick thing. I think that the emergence of deeper friendship is one of the most important things that is needed on the planet. I devote that to talking about friendship a lot in my new book. I think it's so important, and I'm so excited with what you've just said, Brian, that yes, the more insulated we are, the more we think of the importance of friendship. And perhaps the sphere of friendship can deepen and enlarge and spread over the planet, because everyone is our friend, and we can be friendly to everyone. And that is, I think, the shift. We need to be friendly to everyone. They may become our friend. Thank you very much. So we'll just have 2 more questions, and then I'm going to do a guided meditation, if that's okay with people.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. Okay, we have a question from Marilyn. Marilyn, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Oh,
Hi, Marilyn.
hello. Thank you very much for all that you said, Serge. It was beautiful. And really, I was going to make a comment on what was just shared, that I personally feel very different. And one doesn't have to be in hospital for 3 months or to nearly die of the virus to feel a change in view of life. And the way I feel different is I feel very sad, and I try to analyze the sadness, and it's associated with love and loss. And sometimes we only know how much we love somebody or love something when we lose them. And there's a huge sense of loss around, and so there's a sadness and alongside more love, if you know what I mean. And I just wanted to say that Darwin, he wasn't about the survival of the fittest, which a lot of people think, you know, nature red and tooth claw, life eats life, and everybody's fighting everybody else to survive. He was much more of a Lamarckian in his original work about the different finches with their different beaks on the different Galapagos Islands. It was survival of the better adapted. And better adapted means more in tune with your planet and all the other inhabitants or all the rest of life on our planet. And just another sort of rather factual comment. It's a fact in evolution that when a species is very, very successful, and a species is successful when it breeds a lot, but if it outbreeds its resources, then it goes extinct. And when, like you were talking about the virus coming from out there, yes, I can't really work out all the different connections, how out there knows to send a virus. But when species have outbred their resources, they get new viruses always, and they start to kill each other in order to survive, which is hugely sad. And certainly it's not new, but the rate of human population, the breeding of human population is, we've known about it for ages. It's terrible. And, you know, no amount of war or pandemics make much difference, really. And, you know, so I don't know what we do about that. But, you know, it is just a horrible fact that there's too many of us. I don't know what we do about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You brought up an incredibly important sort of question. I hope that you'll all leave this not with answers, but asking questions, because I think the important thing is to be asking questions. And I also just want to say, I really hear you on the sadness, which I feel, and we have to give space for our mourning. And it's even mourning for sort of old parts. I mean, it's just not mourning for sort of dead people, but sort of, there's just a general space of mourning, and we have to allow that, because, and sort of mourn with our hearts open, so that we can take the sorrow into our heart, and then it can become a fuel to help us in our transformational journey. Because I see our hearts as being our great inner instrument of alchemy that can transmute our base metal into gold. So thank you for just being beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Okay, we have one more question, Serge, and that is from, the name is BJC. So I've unmuted you now, so go ahead.
It's Bernard Carr.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
BJC.
Thank you, sir. You've painted a rather optimistic view of what may lie ahead. I think you even referred to it as the promised land.
Yes, I agree.
But I think you referred to it as the promised land, even though we may not all get to see it. But you weren't very specific in describing the features of this promised land. And I would just like to focus on one particular issue, and that is going to be the importance of physical communion. Now, as you know, in England at least, and most other places in the world, we're all confined to our homes at the moment. So we're missing at least physical contact with other people. I was watching a movie the other day, and in this movie, I suddenly realized, my goodness, people are talking to each other, and they're going down to the pub and they're hugging each other and kissing each other. And I thought that was like another world. And one wonders whether it's ever going to come back. And even when the government says we're going to be allowed to leave our homes, I suspect that quite a lot of people are going to actually choose to stay homebound because they're going to be so paranoid about picking up the virus. But the question is therefore well, the other side of this, though, as other people refer to, is that precisely because we're isolated, we're having far more communion. We're ringing up friends and we're having much more contact than we did before. Even this very session has been tremendously rewarding, even though we're not physically together, because your talk has been wonderful and the questions have been wonderful. And so from certain perspectives, not being able to meet physically doesn't actually make any difference. In some sense, it's almost better. So the question I want to ask you is, if we're moving from a physicalistic age to a more spiritualistic age, how crucial is physical communication going to be in this new promised land? Are we going to go back to the old ways where we all just get together physically and take planes, or is in fact a more internet-based form of communion, is that the future?
Well, Bill Gates thinks that's the future. I don't know. And I think that we have to be in our no man's land hovered between our old and the new. And I think that we have to not know and to be okay, to be as okay as we can with the uncertainty. I personally hope that I'm going to be able to hug all my friends. I have my teenage daughter at the other end of the world at the moment, and I hope to be able to hug her. I talk to her all the day, but I miss hugging her. And again, we don't really know what is going to pan out. I feel so much that what happens in our future is up to each of us. That each of us have, just as we create our own personal reality to some extent, so collectively we create the reality that we want. So I think that we all have a certain responsibility, and I wish I was a prophet. I would love to hope that I could meet you in the flesh and give you a hug, because you look a really nice guy.
Oh, well, thank you. I certainly share your hope that hugging will be part of the promised land.
I think hugging has to be part of the promised land, yes.
Spiritual hugging as well as physical hugging.
Absolutely. You know, there are dangers that lie ahead. As the Chinese said, a crisis is a dangerous opportunity. And as someone said earlier, you know, the populists may grow in power, and you know, and they may weaponize this for their political ends. And you know, certain countries like America, that is becoming more sort of nationalistic and protectionistic, and you know, and the control mechanisms that are needed may still stay in place after they're no longer needed. We don't know, but I think we have to take these dangers into consideration. And I just feel that there's going to be a greater spirit of wisdom that will come into the consciousness of our politicians. Maybe only new people will come into positions of power who will actually be wise human beings with big hearts. Again, I want to hold for a positive view.
We have to elect them. Serge.
We've got to.
Some of you I know, and I know this applies to Marilyn. We have dogs, and so we're very lucky to be able to have cuddles with our dogs as well as our people in our spouses and things in our house. So just a little word for dogs. What I'm going to suggest now, Serge, here we are. Wonderful. Excellent.
And here's my friend.
Yeah, wonderful.
Who enjoys cuddles with me.
Andrew, what I'm going to suggest is that actually we now just have 10 minutes in breakout rooms to sort of greet each other, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes and have a few reflections, and then we'll finish with Serge's visualization.
Sounds good.
So over to you, Andrew.
Good. So what I'll do, everyone, is I'll put you into breakout rooms of sort of 3 or 4, and we'll see how that goes for sort of 5 to 10 minutes. So it's 11:40. So I'll bring you back into the main meeting room at 11:50 or just before. And watch out, you'll get a little message saying that you're going to rejoin the main meeting within 60 seconds. And right, I'll do that now. Let's see how we go. Okay. Right, here we go.
Inviting you to join a breakout room.
Get it in there. I think you might need to click yes to invite to go into the breakout room if you haven't done so already. I think, yes, it looks like everyone's going in now. There's a few still to go into breakout rooms. If you see a message on your screen which is asking you to go in, just accept that.
See you anymore. I can see Jean's.
Yes, can you see me now?
Yes, I can. Jean looks very relaxed. Yes, so I hope that was a good experience for you. I certainly enjoyed it myself, and it's lovely just to say a more personal hello to everybody on the call. So we now need to get Serge back.
Serge, if you want to say hello, you're unmuted, so you can just jump back on.
Hello.
Yes.
Are we able to be naughty and go a bit over time, or is this a strict?
Yes, no, I think we can. We started a bit late, so we can go on an extra 10 minutes or so. Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to say, I'm just going to speak for 5 minutes. And then do this meditation.
Okay, great.
Because it just occurred to me that when things are taken away, it allows a space for an opportunity for something to come in. And I was just thinking, our outer security is being taken away, so that it challenges us to find the deeper self where we can feel secure inside ourselves. As our outer going to work is taken away, there's more time to do inner work. As our capacity to consume is removed from us, it opens up a greater need to conserve and to be appreciative of what we have. As it's very likely that a lot of our money will be removed. It challenges us to live more simply, or as Buckminster Fuller said, more out of less. And as our need, you know, our attachment to glamour and bigness and things that everything has to be extraordinary is being taken away. Perhaps we're led back to appreciate that small is beautiful. And as our comforts may be being removed, I think it allows us time to connect more with real things and nature and animals. Animals, it's so important. And who knows, if we start connecting more to nature, perhaps sort of nature is going to revive, and are connecting to our planet in a more loving, as opposed to just using our planet to get rich, the extractionistic way, that we're going to see big changes. And the last thing I want to say is that I think this is going to see the death knell of the American dream, which I always think has been a kind of false, has been about falseness. And those who got embroiled in it suffered because they felt their houses and yachts were not big enough. And those who couldn't get involved in it suffered because they wanted the houses and the yachts and they felt they couldn't participate in it. So I just want to say these few things that I think are important. And now I'm going to do a guided meditation to a little bit of music. Oh, but before I do the guided meditation, I just want to say sort of once more, please, if any of you have some issues you might talk about, you know, to a friend, please contact me. I'd be very happy to do a session with you, and no charge. I'm your friend, but I have a few little skills in sort of different areas. So, you know, please take advantage of me. Okay, so here is a guided visualization. Can you hear the music? Okay, I want you to close your eyes and just go inside. And I want you to connect to your inner heart, your heart chakra here in the center of your chest. And I want you to breathe in and out. And just be aware, how does your heart feel? It feels sad or heavy or awake, happy? Just observe how your heart feels. And be fully with whatever is going on inside you at this moment. And now let yourself go a little deeper. And find a space in your heart that exists deeper than the realm of your feelings. Find your deeper spiritual heart. That exists in the very deepest part of your being. It exists beyond the tragedies, unfurling beyond feelings. Just connect with this deepest part of who you are. And feel this presence inside you as a presence. As a sacred presence. And be that sacred presence. Let it deepen. And as you rest in this sacred presence, you're aware that you inhabit a world that has stopped. A world where nothing is clear anymore. And as your heart is the source of great wisdom, I want you to ask your heart. Maybe you can have a pen, paper with you as you do this. Ask your heart, what are my challenges in my life right now? What is this confusion going on in the outer world? What is it asking of me? Is it asking me to have more compassion for myself? Or compassion for others? Is it asking me to be more accepting of what is? And even to celebrate what is? Is it asking me to go deeper into my dark side, into my shadow? What qualities are required of me at this particular time? That I be more loving, more courageous, more accepting, more tolerant, and ask yourself, how is this coronavirus conspiring to bring grace into my life? Just go deep into the sense. Grace is about connecting with, it's about a blessing. And feel that grace. Even if it's harsh, even if it's fierce. lastly, just be aware that there's a healing power inside your heart. And I just want you to get a vision of the planet Earth, and there's light around it. See light all around it. Just ask for the light and the love and the power of your heart and move into and radiate this great orb of our planet Earth. Say to yourself, I give love and healing and compassion to myself. I give love and healing and compassion to my fellow human beings. I give love and healing and compassion to my planet. And let's finish with doing 3 ohms.
Thank you so much, Serge. It's a beautiful feeling to sense that the connectedness of the people who are on this call, which I also sensed when I did the global meditation 2-3 weeks ago. We got up at 4:30 in the morning, and some of you may have joined in. I felt there was a sense of a network of threads of light, that people were doing their best in their own situation and in their own being to come together at this subtle level. So I think this coming together virtually, even though we're all in our own physical spaces, we're in a common space on this meeting and over this weekend, if you're joining us for the rest of the sessions. So Serge, I'd like to thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart for what you have contributed this morning. And I feel very nourished, and I feel nourished not only by what you've said, but also by the sense that I get of being together with all of you. And I'd just like to invite people to put a reflection on what any thoughts you've had from the morning, put it into the chat box so that we can, and what you're taking away with you into the rest of the weekend. So it would be interesting just to see what people are feeling, if you'd like to share anything. And you'll see this, Serge, coming up in the chat box. a healing energy, solidarity, interconnectedness, kindness. So that's something. All are different, all are one. Same page, people, roughly. Peace. Nobody at the back. I love that. Nobody at the back. Feel very connected. And need to be patient for what emerges. Very, very much. Very much. We're in the middle of a process which Serge has been explaining this morning, and we need to, as it says in the International Futures Forum card, one of the things was to say that you have to sit in the messiness for a while, and then we'll see what emerges from that. So that's wonderful feedback. Thank you very much indeed to everyone. And lots of questions coming up. That's very, very beautiful. So I think we'll close the meeting for the moment. Thanking Serge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all this light. Serge and I were both mentored to some extent by Sir George Trevelyan. And at the end of any meeting, he used to send out the light. So this was his way of doing it. So I'm sending you the light of this candle, and it'll be relit at 4 o'clock this afternoon, when I hope to see you again later today.
Oh, and blessings to all of you. And again, as I said, if any of you want to contact me, I'm very happy to be there for you as a friend.
Brilliant. So thank you so much.
Okay.
So one last thing I can do is I can quickly unmute everyone so that we'll see how this goes, and I can put it onto gallery view and everyone can sort of say goodbye and wave hands, and let's try that now with the one last thing. So everyone's unmuted, so
thanks very much.
Thank you.
see everyone's hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you. Bye. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you all.
Hey.
She's very small.
Of the blackbird, just because it's a lot of